The crash was sudden. One moment the cargo ship from Earth was gliding through space, steady on its route, and the next moment alarms were screaming and lights were flashing red. The hull shuddered like a beast in pain, and then came the tearing sound of metal giving way. Aaron, a mechanic by duty, had no time to think. He grabbed onto the nearest brace as the ship split apart. Gravity twisted and the ship plunged down toward the unknown world below. When Aaron opened his eyes, the fire was gone. He found himself lying in the wreckage, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burned wires. His arms ached and a cut ran across his forehead, but he was alive. Around him were scattered crates, shattered panels, and scraps of the ship that once carried him. He could hear faint groans from a few other survivors, though most of the crew had not been lucky. Aaron did not stay still for long. He pulled himself up, checked his body for injuries, and began to move through the remains. The world outside was strange. The forest stretched wide with towering trees that glowed faintly in the dim light. Their trunks were broad and covered with vines that pulsed with a soft blue shimmer, as if alive with hidden energy. The air carried a faint hum, like distant music that had no source. It was unlike any world Aaron had seen before, and he had worked in space for years. Aaron gathered what supplies he could. A pack of ration bars, a canteen, and a small toolkit were all that remained to him. He was not a soldier, not a leader, but he knew survival. The crash had thrown them far from any chance of rescue, and he understood that the only way to live was to learn about the land. He set off from the wreck, moving carefully through the alien forest. Hours passed as Aaron pushed forward. He marked his path with scraps of broken metal to keep track of his way back. Strange creatures moved in the trees above, their eyes glowing like lanterns. The ground rustled with unseen things that scattered when he drew near. Aaron did not chase them. His mind was focused on food, water, and shelter. Yet fate had other plans for him. Near a stream he heard cries. At first he thought it was another human, perhaps a survivor calling for help. But the sound was higher, sharper, like the call of frightened children. Aaron's instincts pulled him closer. He moved behind a thick bush, and there he saw them. A group of small beings no taller than his waist huddled together. Their skin shimmered like pearl, their eyes large and bright, and their limbs thin but agile. They looked fragile but not weak. Each one carried markings across their skin like patterns of light. These were no human children. These were alien young, but they were not alone. From the shadowed trees came hunters. Their bodies were armored with scales the color of rust, their mouths filled with sharp teeth. They moved with deadly patience, circling the alien young like wolves closing on prey. The small beings cried out, pressing together, their fear clear to anyone watching. Aaron did not think of who they were or what they might mean. He did not consider if they were friend or foe. All he saw were young ones about to be torn apart. Something deep within him, something that had nothing to do with reason, made him act. He burst from the bush with a shout. His hands grabbed a broken metal rod from his pack, the closest thing to a weapon he had. He charged at the predators, swinging wildly, the rod sparking as it hit stone. The predators turned, their yellow eyes glowing with anger at the sudden intruder. Aaron planted himself between them and the alien young, raising his arms wide as if to shield them with his whole body. The predators snarled, circling him. One lunged forward, but Aaron struck with the rod, the impact ringing out as metal hit scales. Another slashed at him, claws tearing his sleeve, but he stood firm. Pain surged in his arm, but he did not move aside. His heart pounded with fear, yet his legs did not falter. The alien young watched in silence, their eyes wide, their cries fading as they saw the strange human shielding them. Aaron shouted again, his voice filled with defiance. He swung the rod in a wide arc, sparks flying as it scraped against stone. The predators hesitated. They were hunters, but they were not foolish. This prey was no easy catch. With low growls, they backed away, their tails lashing in frustration. One by one, they melted back into the shadows of the trees, leaving Aaron standing, breathless and trembling before the young ones. For a long moment, there was only silence. Aaron lowered the rod, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the small beings. They looked back at him with wonder, not fear. One of them, braver than the rest, stepped forward and touched his arm with a glowing hand. The touch was warm, gentle, and filled with a strange energy that sent a shiver through him. Aaron did not understand their words, but he felt their gratitude. He crouched low, lowering his head to show he meant no harm. The young ones gathered close, surrounding him, their soft voices rising like music. Aaron, weary and wounded, smiled faintly. He had no idea what he had started, but in that moment he knew it mattered. From the trees, unseen by him, others watched. Tall figures stood in the shadows, their forms cloaked in armor and light. Among them was Rena, a guardian of her people. She had followed the cries of the young and arrived in time to see everything. She had seen the human leap forward, unarmed, unafraid, and shield the young with his own body. To her people, such an act carried weight beyond words. She spoke softly to the others beside her, her voice firm. This human was no ordinary being. He had done what even many of their own might hesitate to do. And by their law, by their belief, anyone who shielded the young in such a way was no longer an outsider. He was bound to the clan. Aaron, unaware of the eyes upon him, gathered his breath and stood tall again. He glanced toward the trees, sensing movement, but saw nothing. He looked back at the young ones and motioned for them to stay close. His heart was still racing, his arm still bleeding, but inside he felt a strange peace. He had done what was right. That was all he knew. The forest grew quiet once more, the glowing vines swaying softly in the breeze. Aaron stood as a lone figure, a human among alien young, not knowing that his life had already changed forever. Aaron woke at dawn. The forest light was different than Earth's. The trees glowed faintly, and the sky above was painted with streaks of violet and gold. He had slept lightly, resting against a fallen trunk, with the alien young gathered near him like a circle of watchful eyes. The night had been restless, filled with strange cries and whispers in the distance, but the predators had not returned. His arm throbbed where the claws had torn through his sleeve. He pulled out his toolkit, using a strip of cloth to bind the wound as best as he could. The alien young watched every movement with curiosity, tilting their heads and whispering to one another in their strange voices. Aaron smiled at them weakly. He did not know their words, but he felt their intent. They trusted him now. Yet soon the forest stirred with a different presence. Aaron felt it before he saw it. The air shifted and shadows stretched long. Figures moved between the glowing trunks, tall and graceful, their armor reflecting the morning light. They carried weapons that looked alive, pulsing with the same strange energy as the vines. The young ones gasped, rushing forward with joy. They ran to the tall figures clinging to their legs. Aaron stood, clutching the metal rod he had used the night before. He had no idea if these were enemies or friends, only that they were powerful. His heart raced as he raised the rod slightly, preparing himself for whatever came. From among the tall figures stepped one with presence. Her armor was darker than the rest, lined with silver light, and her gaze was sharp yet calm. She was Rena, guardian of her people. She looked at Aaron, her eyes narrowing as if measuring his worth. The young ones cried out and pointed toward him, their voices rising in excited tones. Rena listened, her face unreadable. Aaron lowered the rod slowly. He raised his free hand, palm open, showing he meant no harm. He spoke in a steady voice. "I helped them, that's all." His words were useless to them, but his tone carried meaning. Rena stepped closer. Her height was greater than his, her movements precise and confident. She stopped a few paces away, studying him. With a gesture of her hand, two of her warriors moved forward. They did not attack, but they took position beside Aaron, guiding him firmly yet not cruelly. The young ones protested, their voices high, but Rena silenced them with a word. Aaron felt his chest tighten. He was being taken. He did not know where, and he did not know why, but he had no choice. He kept calm, gripping his rod lightly, though one warrior soon took it from him with ease. They walked together through the forest, the young ones trailing behind, refusing to leave him. Aaron glanced back at them often, feeling their loyalty, and it gave him strength. He knew he could not abandon them now. The walk lasted hours. The forest gave way to wider paths carved into the earth, lined with glowing stones. The sound of water grew louder until at last they reached a vast clearing. Before Aaron stood a city unlike anything he had ever seen. The city rose high into the trees, built of living wood shaped into towers and bridges. Vines of light wrapped around the structures, pulsing gently like veins. Platforms stretched between the branches with figures moving gracefully above, their armor gleaming in the sun. It was beautiful and strange, alive yet structured. Aaron stopped, staring in awe. The warriors led him across a wide bridge into the heart of the city. Everywhere eyes turned toward him. Alien faces peered from balconies, their skin glowing faintly, their voices whispering in tones he could not understand. Some looked wary, others curious, a few even hostile. At last they entered a grand hall built within the largest tree. Its walls pulsed with light and the air hummed with energy. Aaron was placed at the center, while Rena stood before a circle of elders seated in carved thrones. The young ones pushed their way inside, refusing to be left behind, and stood near him protectively. The hall filled with voices. The elders questioned Rena, their words flowing in sharp yet musical tones. Rena answered calmly, her voice steady. She pointed to Aaron, then to the young ones, reenacting what had happened in the forest. Her hands moved with precision, showing his act of shielding them with his body. The elders murmured among themselves, their eyes flicking toward the human with doubt and interest. Aaron stood quietly. He could not understand their words, but he understood their eyes. They were judging him, weighing his place here. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay still. He had come here by chance, not by choice, yet now his fate was in their hands. Finally, one elder raised a staff and the hall fell silent. The elder spoke with slow authority. Rena answered firmly, her gaze steady. Then she turned to Aaron. She stepped close, looking directly into his eyes. For a moment there was no barrier of language, only the raw truth of intent. She touched her hand to her chest, then pointed to him. Her words were clear, though he could not understand them. Her eyes, however, told him much. She was not calling him prisoner. She was naming him something else. Bound, perhaps, chosen. Aaron's breath caught. He looked around the hall. Some faces showed approval, others disapproval. The young ones pressed closer, their small hands clutching at his legs. Whatever was being decided, they wanted him to stay. The elder struck the staff again. The decision was made. Rena spoke once more, her tone final. She stepped back and signaled the warriors. They did not restrain Aaron this time. Instead, they guided him out of the hall and into a chamber filled with soft light. It was not a cell. It was a room prepared for rest. A bed of woven vines, a basin of water, and strange fruits glowing faintly were laid out. Aaron sat on the bed slowly. He looked around, confused. He was not free, yet he was not a captive in chains either. He was something in between. As the door closed, the young ones slipped inside before the warriors could stop them. They climbed onto the bed, chattering in their musical voices, their eyes bright with relief. Aaron laughed softly, shaking his head. Even here, even in this strange place, he was not alone. That night, as he lay in the alien chamber, Aaron thought of Earth, of home, and of the ship that had brought him here. He thought of the predators in the forest and of the moment he had thrown himself over the young ones. He wondered if he had made a mistake or if fate had chosen him for something greater. Outside his chamber, Rena stood in silence, watching the door. She remembered the sight of him standing against the hunters, shielding the young with his body. To her people, that act was sacred. She had claimed him not as a captive, but as one bound by honor, and she would make certain he understood it in time. The city hummed softly through the night, alive with light and song. Aaron closed his eyes, not knowing what tomorrow would bring, only that his path had already been decided. He was no longer just a survivor. He was now part of something he could not yet name. Aaron rose early, the strange city already alive with movement outside his chamber. The walls of living wood glowed faintly, and he could hear voices in the distance singing and speaking in rhythms he could not understand. He sat on the woven bed, rubbing his eyes, trying to piece together his thoughts. He was not a prisoner in chains, but neither was he free. He was kept here, watched and judged. The door opened and one of the young ones peeked in. It was the same brave child who had touched his arm after the forest attack. The small being chirped a greeting in its own voice, then scampered inside, followed by the others. Aaron smiled as they gathered around him, chattering, pointing at his arm where the bandage still held. They seemed fascinated by him, and though their words made no sense, their intent was clear. They liked him, trusted him. Soon after, Rena entered. She carried herself with steady calm, her armor faintly glowing in the dim light. The young ones fell silent at her presence, but their eyes still shone warmly at her. She looked at Aaron, then at his wound. Without a word, she handed him a small container filled with a thick, glowing paste. She gestured for him to unwrap the cloth. Aaron hesitated but obeyed. The wound was red and swollen, but when she spread the paste over it, the sting faded almost at once. A cool sensation spread through his arm, and within minutes the swelling eased. Aaron let out a soft sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, though he knew she did not understand. Rena only nodded, her eyes steady, then motioned for him to follow. The young ones trailed after them as they left the chamber. Aaron walked through bridges high above the ground, the city stretching around him in all directions. He could see families gathered in platforms, warriors sharpening their strange living weapons and traders exchanging glowing fruits and stones. Everything seemed alive, shaped by nature rather than built by force. Everywhere he walked, eyes followed him. Some curious, some suspicious, a few openly cold. He was the outsider, the stranger brought by Rena. He felt the weight of those stares pressing on him, yet he kept walking. Rena led him into a wide circle where others had gathered. It was a training ground. Warriors stood in pairs, practicing with staffs that pulsed with light. Their movements were sharp, graceful, and controlled. When Iran stepped into the circle, the voices around him grew louder. He could feel their judgment. Rena motioned to him, then handed him a simple wooden staff. She gestured for him to take a stance. Aaron frowned, realizing she wanted him to train. He shook his head lightly, pointing to himself. "I'm not one of you," he said. But Rena only crossed her arms and waited. The others watched with interest. Aaron sighed, gripping the staff clumsily. One warrior stepped forward, twirling his glowing weapon with ease. Aaron braced himself, heart pounding. The duel began. The warrior lunged with speed Aaron could barely follow. He raised the staff just in time, blocking the strike. The force rattled through his arms, but he held his ground. Another strike came, and another. Aaron moved back, struggling, his arms aching. He was not trained for this. He was only a mechanic, a man who worked with machines, not weapons. But as the strikes kept coming, something inside him changed. He stopped trying to match the warrior's grace. Instead, he relied on instinct and stubbornness. He ducked low, blocked hard, and swung wide with raw strength. His moves were messy, untrained, but full of determination. The watching crowd murmured as he refused to yield. Finally, the warrior struck the staff from his hands, sending it clattering across the ground. Aaron stood panting, his arms sore, his shirt damp with sweat. He expected laughter or scorn. Instead, there was silence. Rena stepped forward, picking up the staff. She looked at him, her face unreadable, then gave him the staff back. Aaron blinked, surprised. She was not mocking him. She was testing him. And though he had lost, he had not backed down. That was what mattered. The days passed with more such trials. Rena brought him to gatherings where food was shared. He learned to eat the glowing fruits, the soft breads made from strange grains, and the broths brewed from herbs that shimmered in the dark. At first the taste was strange, but soon he found strength in them. He watched their rituals. He saw how they prayed to the great trees, touching their hands to the glowing vines. He saw how they honored their young, lifting them high during ceremonies of light, and he began to understand why his act in the forest carried such weight. One evening, Rena sat across from him. She spoke slowly, pointing to herself. "Rena," she said. Aaron's eyes widened. He repeated it, "Rena." She nodded, then pointed to him. Aaron understood. "Aaron," he said. For the first time, their voices bridged the divide. The young ones clapped their hands, repeating his name with delight. Rena gave the faintest hint of a smile. From then on, she began teaching him words. Slowly, carefully, he repeated them. He pointed to objects, to actions, and she gave the names. His tongue stumbled over the sounds, but he learned. It was not easy, yet each day he gained more. As he learned, he also began to hear the whispers around him. Not all welcomed him. Some warriors muttered that an outsider had no place among them. A few elders questioned Rena's decision to keep him. Aaron could feel the tension growing, but he also saw change. The young ones followed him everywhere, laughing at his attempts to speak their words. Traders gave him fruits with curious smiles. Even some warriors began to nod at him with respect after seeing his stubborn effort and training. One night, Rena brought him to the great hall again. The elders gathered and the discussion began. This time Aaron understood fragments of their words. He heard his name spoken, followed by phrases he recognized as outsider and protector. The debate grew heated. Some argued for his return to the wilds. Others spoke of honor and sacred law. At last, Rena stepped forward. She raised her hand, her voice firm. She spoke of the forest, of the moment he had thrown himself over the young. She called it sacred. She declared that by their law he was bound to them. The hall grew silent. The elders considered her words. Finally, the eldest among them rose. The elder's voice was slow, deliberate. Aaron caught only pieces, but he felt the weight of it. The decision was not full acceptance, nor was it rejection. He would remain, but he must prove his worth. When the hall emptied, Rena walked beside him. She spoke softly, her eyes steady. He could not understand every word, but he knew the meaning. He was not yet one of them, but he had a chance to be. That night, lying in his chamber, Aaron thought of everything. He thought of Earth, of the wreckage, of the crew who had not survived. He thought of the predators in the forest, of the moment he had stood against them with nothing but a rod in his body, and he thought of Rena, who had chosen to keep him not as a captive but as something more. He felt torn between two worlds. Part of him longed for home, for the familiar stars and the machines he knew, but another part felt drawn here, to the strange beauty of this city, to the warmth of the young ones, and to the unshakable strength in Rena's eyes. He did not know what his future would be, but he knew one truth. To these people, he was no longer just a lost mechanic. He was the man who had shielded the young, and that meant more than he had ever imagined. The next morning, the forest around the city was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Aaron had risen before dawn, his body still sore from the training and the long walks through the alien city. He felt both stronger and more aware of his own limits. The glow of the trees and the hum of the city had become familiar, yet he knew that danger could arrive without warning. He was walking along one of the bridges when a warning horn echoed through the city. Its sound was unlike anything he had heard on Earth, low and vibrating, shaking the air itself. People and aliens alike stopped in their tasks, looking toward the trees beyond the city with concern. Aaron's heart jumped. He had been warned before that the predators would return, but he had hoped the forest would remain calm. Rena appeared at his side, her face serious. She spoke quickly, pointing toward the outer forest and then gesturing at him. Aaron understood enough to know they needed help. She handed him a staff, glowing faintly with energy. It was heavier than the one he had used in training, but it hummed with power, responding to its wielder's intent. Aaron took it, gripping it tightly. The young ones gathered near the city gates, chattering and looking frightened. Aaron knelt before them. He held out his hand and they touched him lightly. Their energy flowed into him, a warm reassurance that strengthened his resolve. He would not let them be harmed. Rena led him to the walls of the city where other warriors had gathered. The predators were coming. From the trees, dark shapes moved with frightening speed, their eyes glowing red in the dim light. The creatures had grown larger and more numerous since the last encounter. They moved with cunning, circling and waiting for a chance to strike. Aaron felt fear, sharp and clear, but he did not hesitate. He had stood between life and death once before, and he could do it again. Rena placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze meeting his. In that silent moment, she passed a single thought. Courage alone was not enough. Use your mind and trust those around you. The battle began without warning. The predators lunged, claws and teeth flashing. Warriors met them at the walls, their staffs glowing as they struck with precision. Aaron raised his own staff, parrying and striking as he had been taught in the last weeks. His movements were not graceful, but they were effective. He learned quickly to use the terrain to his advantage, leaning into the sway of the bridges and jumping onto platforms to strike from above. One predator leapt toward the young ones at the gate. Aaron moved faster than he had thought possible. He blocked the creature with his staff, knocking it aside, and grabbed the nearest child, pulling it to safety. Others followed his lead, rushing toward cover. He felt their small hands clutching him, their trust anchoring his courage. The fight raged on. Warriors shouted, predators growled, and the air was filled with the clash of power. Aaron realized that raw strength alone would not win the day. He had to think, to anticipate, to guide the young ones and support the defenders. He used broken tree branches, fallen stones and debris from the forest to slow the predators' advance. He created paths for the young to move safely and distracted the creatures at critical moments, drawing them into traps set by the warriors. Through the chaos, Aaron caught glimpses of Rena. She moved like a shadow, striking with precision and grace. Her staff glowed brightly as it connected with the predators, pushing them back. She did not shout or give orders. Her presence alone guided the defenders, and Aaron realized that her leadership was not in words but in example. Hours passed like minutes. Aaron's muscles ached and his body screamed for rest, but he did not stop. He fought beside warriors twice his size, faced predators larger and faster than him and still managed to protect the young ones. He discovered that courage was not enough. He had to trust his instincts, to act before fear could paralyze him. One predator, larger than the rest, leapt from the treetops toward Aaron. It was faster than he expected, and for a moment he froze. Then he remembered the small hands that had touched his arm in the forest. The trust of the young ones, the guidance of Rena. He swung his staff with all his strength, hitting the creature squarely across the chest. Sparks flew and the predator roared in surprise before retreating into the shadows. The young ones cheered in their musical voices, though Aaron barely noticed. He was too focused on the next threat, the next movement of the predators. Each swing of his staff, each block, each step was a test. He felt alive in a way he had never known. The danger, the fear, the responsibility. It sharpened him, made him see clearly what he was capable of. As the sun began to rise higher, the tide of battle shifted. The warriors gained ground, pushing the predators back toward the forest. Aaron moved to the front lines, blocking and striking with precision. He used his knowledge of human tools and machines, improvising traps and barriers that slowed the predators. He had become part of the defense, not just a helper. Finally, the last of the predators retreated into the forest, howling in frustration. The city was safe, though the damage was clear. Broken bridges, scorched platforms, and scattered debris marked the battle's intensity. Aaron sank to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. The young ones ran to him, wrapping their small arms around him, their eyes shining with admiration and relief. Rena approached, her armor still glowing, her face calm but proud. She placed a hand on his shoulder. No words were needed. Aaron understood her approval. He had proven himself not through strength alone, but through courage, intelligence, and care. He had protected those who could not protect themselves. In the aftermath, Aaron walked through the city, helping repair the bridges and assisting with the wounded. The warriors nodded at him with respect. Even those who had doubted him now looked at him differently. He was no longer just an outsider. He was part of their defense, a protector in his own right. The young ones stayed close, laughing and chattering as they helped him gather tools and supplies. They guided him to places he had not seen before, showing him hidden paths and secret vantage points. Aaron realized that they trusted him fully, and that trust gave him more strength than any weapon could provide. That night, Rena brought him to a high platform overlooking the forest. The city below glowed softly, and the forest beyond was alive with the hum of unseen creatures. She did not speak at first. She simply stood beside him, her gaze on the horizon. Then slowly she gestured toward the young ones, then to him. Aaron understood. She was teaching him the meaning of his place here. He was no longer just a survivor or a guest. He was bound to them by his actions, by his courage, and by the sacred trust he had earned. Aaron looked out over the forest, thinking of Earth, of the crash, and of everything he had done to survive. He realized that he had changed. He had faced danger and fear, yet he had acted with purpose. He had grown stronger, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. Rena placed a hand lightly on his back, a gesture of acknowledgement. He looked at her, understanding that she had been watching him closely. She had tested him, guided him, and now she had confirmed that he was worthy. The young ones gathered at their feet, their voices soft and musical, repeating his name in joy. Aaron knelt among them, feeling the warmth of their trust and admiration. He had never imagined that a single act of courage in the forest would lead to this moment. As the night deepened, Aaron knew that trials would come again. The forest was alive with danger and the predators might return. But he also knew that he was not alone. He had allies, friends, and a place among this strange and beautiful people. For the first time since the crash, Aaron felt a deep sense of belonging. He was part of something greater, something sacred. He had faced fire and fear and he had survived. He had protected the young. And now in the quiet glow of the alien city, he understood that he had truly become a protector. The morning light filtered through the glowing vines, painting the city in soft hues of blue and gold. Aaron stood on a high platform overlooking the forest. The battle from the previous day had left marks, broken branches, scorch marks, and flattened undergrowth. But the predators had retreated. The city was alive again, filled with the hum of activity, laughter, and work. The young ones darted across the platforms, calling to each other. their voices carrying joy and energy. Aaron's gaze shifted to Rena, who stood beside him silently. Her armor shimmered faintly in the morning sun. She had been watching him closely since the moment they arrived at the city, testing, guiding, and observing. Now she regarded him with a calm expression that spoke of trust and approval. Aaron understood her meaning. He was no longer just a guest or a survivor. He had proven himself. The elders had gathered earlier that morning in the grand hall. Rena had called for Aaron to be present. As he walked through the glowing bridges and winding platforms, he noticed the city watching him. Some faces were still cautious, but many held admiration and respect. The young ones ran alongside him, urging him forward. He realized that he had become a symbol to them, a protector whose courage had earned their trust. In the hall, the elders waited, seated in their carved thrones. The young ones were near the entrance, chirping softly. Rena motioned for Aaron to stand before them. Silence fell over the hall. Even though he could not fully understand the language, he felt the weight of the moment. Rena spoke first. She told the elders of Aaron's actions in the forest, of the night he had shielded the young ones with his body. She described how he had faced danger without fear, how he had protected those who could not defend themselves, and how he had continued to fight alongside the warriors during the recent battle. Her words were firm and clear, and even the elders who had doubted him before listened carefully. One elder rose. His face was lined with age, and his eyes seemed to pierce through Aaron as if searching for truth. He spoke slowly, deliberately, describing the sacred law of their people. To shield the young was an act of the highest honor, binding the protector to the clan. Aaron's heart thumped. He understood enough to know what this meant. The elder gestured toward Aran and then toward the young ones. His tone carried authority, and the hall fell silent. He spoke of trust, courage, and the sacred duty of protecting life. Then with a final gesture, he declared Aaron to be bound to the clan as a protector. Aaron's eyes widened. The words were not meant for him alone. They were a promise, a responsibility, and an honor all at once. The young ones squealed in delight, running forward to surround him. They climbed onto his legs, tugged at his hands, and pressed their faces against his armor. Aaron knelt among them, feeling the warmth and joy of their presence. He had saved their lives once, and now they claimed him as their own. The realization settled deep within him. He had found a place where he mattered, where his actions held meaning beyond survival. Rena stepped forward, her gaze softening. She touched his shoulder lightly. Her eyes spoke words he could not yet understand, but the meaning was clear. He had earned his place. He had become part of their world. In the days that followed, Aaron settled into his new role. He helped train other defenders, guiding them with techniques he had improvised during the battle. He repaired platforms and bridges using both human ingenuity and the alien materials he had learned to understand. He shared knowledge of machines and structures with the warriors, earning their respect for his skill and creativity. The young ones were never far from him. They followed him everywhere, laughing, playing, and learning. Aaron taught them simple human words, and they taught him more of their language. Through shared effort and communication, he began to bridge the divide between human and alien, forming bonds that went beyond language. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the glowing trees, Aaron stood on a platform overlooking the city. The forest stretched endlessly beyond, filled with life and mystery. He thought of Earth, of the crew who had not survived, and of the world he had left behind. A part of him longed for the familiar, for the stars he had once traveled among. But another part felt a deep connection to this place, to the young ones, to Rena, and to the people who had accepted him. Rena appeared beside him silently, her gaze on the horizon. She spoke softly, her tone calm and steady. Aaron understood a few words clearly. Protector, chosen, sacred. She was reminding him of the responsibility he now carried. He nodded, accepting it fully. The night passed quietly. Aaron slept in his chamber with the young ones nearby. He dreamt of the forest, of predators leaping from the shadows, and of the moments he had shielded the children. But unlike before, the dreams ended with warmth, with the laughter of the young ones, and with the knowledge that he had been accepted. Days turned to weeks. Aaron continued to train, to protect, and to learn. He became skilled with the alien weapons, understanding their energy and movement. He worked alongside Rena, learning strategy, tactics, and the unspoken art of leadership. Slowly, he gained not only strength but wisdom. One afternoon, the city faced another test. A storm unlike any Earth had known rolled through the forest. Lightning struck the tallest trees, and winds threatened to tear bridges from their roots. The young ones screamed in fear, and Aaron moved quickly, guiding them to safety. He directed the warriors, repaired damaged platforms, and used every skill he had learned to protect the city. By the time the storm passed, the city had survived. Aaron stood drenched and exhausted, yet proud. Rena approached, her armor slick with rain, but her expression calm. She placed her hand on his arm and nodded. He had proven himself again, not through combat alone, but through courage, leadership, and care. The young ones gathered around him, their eyes shining with admiration. They hugged him, climbed on his shoulders, and clutched his hands. In that moment, Aaron realized that he was not just part of the city. He was part of a family, bound by trust and shared experience. As night fell, Aaron stood on the highest platform, looking out over the glowing city and the vast forest beyond. He felt a deep sense of peace. He had come from a world of machines and stars, yet here he had found something he had never known: belonging. He had become more than a survivor. He had become a protector, a teacher, a friend, and a bridge between worlds. Rena joined him silently. She did not need words. Her presence alone spoke of respect, understanding, and trust. Aaron looked at her and nodded, acknowledging the bond they had formed. They had shared trials, dangers, and victories. Together, they had faced fear and come through stronger. The young ones played nearby, their laughter echoing through the glowing city. Aaron watched them, feeling the weight of his promise and the warmth of their trust. He knew he would protect them, guide them, and remain with them for as long as he lived. He had shielded them once with his body, and now they had claimed him with their hearts. In the quiet of the night, Aaron thought of Earth again. He thought of the stars, of the life he had left behind, and of the journey that had brought him here. Yet he understood something he had never known before. Humanity's greatest strength was not technology, nor weapons, nor even knowledge. It was the courage to protect life, the will to act even when danger loomed, and the ability to love and care for others, even those not like oneself. Aaron had lived that truth. He had acted without hesitation, guided by instinct and heart. And now, in this alien world, he had found a place where that courage mattered, where it shaped the lives of those around him, and where it earned him a home. The city glowed beneath the night sky. The forest beyond was alive, calm for the first time in weeks. Aaron stood tall, feeling the bond with Rena, with the young ones, and with the people who had accepted him. He had faced fire, fear, and the unknown. He had shielded the young and earned his place among them. He was no longer just a man from Earth. He was a protector, a keeper of life, and a bridge between two worlds. And as the wind carried the hum of the forest and the city together, Aaron knew that he had truly found where he belonged. He turned toward Rena and the young ones, and for the first time, he felt a complete sense of belonging. He was home.